Today, joining me on the Accounting Apps podcast is Tom Herbert, the technology editor at the British online publication Accounting Web. Welcome to the Accounting Apps podcast, Tom. Before we dive into today's episode, can I get you to share with our listeners a little bit about yourself? And I'd love it if you can share with us your favorite Dyson appliance.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Hi, Heather. I'm Tom Herbert, the technology editor for Accounting Web. So I have been at it, well, in the accounting journalism space since 2015. And my current role, I write about, all things accounting and technology. So it's a broad remit, as I'm sure you can imagine, but one that keeps me busy anyway. It just cut out a little bit towards the end. I didn't get the last question.
Your favorite Dyson appliance. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. Dyson. You used the word for Dyson.
I did indeed. My goodness. Yes.
Am I saying it wrong? Dyson.
Yeah. No. The man himself would sort of stride. He's very tall. He'd sort of stride up and down the office. This is before they sort of moved everything over to the Far East. But yes, I'm incredibly fond of my sort of handheld Hoover that I still have from my time there. You got very good sort of employee discounts there. So that was good. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's the first time we've had a Dyson handheld Hoover mentioned on the show. Fantastic. So, Tom, I've invited you on the show to talk about the British Post Office scandal. As an Australian accountant who's been involved in implementing accounting technology for over a decade, I watched the 4-part television drama, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, and was literally shrieking at the TV and about what was unfolding there. It's probably the very first time that it sort of came to light for me. I cannot believe what has happened, and that it has been happening for decades, not months, not years, but for actual decades. And I can see on your Accounting Web website, there looks like there's been over 100 articles or mentions of this scandal. And I thought you would be the best person to share with our global listeners what has actually happened.
It'd be a pleasure. As I say, I will try my best. It is, quite simply, one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in British legal history. It's been rumbling on, as you said, for 20 years, and until a TV drama in January made it headline news for about a week, and it's kind of rumbled along in the background at very glacial speed, really. But the TV drama was great, but it was a bit like looking into the sun at times. You can't watch it for too long. I took it in bite-sized chunks because it made my blood boil. And, having previously covered it, I roughly knew what was to come. So I'm not sure. I think, a lot of British people didn't really know that much about it, to be honest, until this TV drama, unless you read the business pages or, like niche publications. Computer Weekly were the first to cover it. Private Eye covered it. We've covered it to a greater or lesser extent as well. But I think it brought the attention to the mainstream, definitely.
So essentially, if we move back 20 years, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you have in Britain is people buy kind of what is known as it's not a franchise, but it's a franchise of a post office, and they're called subpostmasters. Okay, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. The people involved are sort of sub postmasters, and without going too far down the rabbit hole, post office was our sort of national provider of mail and other various financial and government services. But the government owns the post office, but then the majority of the branches are privately owned and run as these sub post offices, where I think there's about 11,000 post offices throughout the UK, and about 8,000 of them are these sub post offices, as it were.
And in a village, lots of things happened in the post office, as well as buying stamps. People got their pension there. They cashed checks there. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely, a lot of vital services that otherwise you'd be completely cut off from village life. So yeah, quite often you'd have a post office and a shop running sort of simultaneously. Yeah.
And so the sub-postmasters, they're very invested. They're not an employee. They're very financially invested in that operation. And I think late 1990s, a point of sale system is implemented. It is correct me again if I'm wrong, the Horizon system, which is created by Fujitsu, is implemented, this point of sale system.
Yeah, it was to automate post office services from the old sort of paper-based tills that have been used in across the country, really, to a networked system. Yeah, I mean, countertop sales, point of sale, and an accounting system, as it were, that linked the entire post office system together. And they rolled it out to about 300 branches in 1999, and then the other, I think, about sort of 12,000 or so in 2000.
2000. Okay, so we're talking 24 years ago, 25 years ago. Prince was singing, 1999 back then, and I'm an accounting technology lover, and I would be sort of saying, yay, digital, this is fantastic, this is the way to go. But it seems what transpired is this point of sale system, it has issues, and it doesn't reconcile correctly, and people have unbalanced reconciliations. And whenever this happens, the post office turns around and says, you must have stolen that money. You owe it to us. You owe that money to us. And we're talking tens of thousands of dollars this is happening.
It was terrible software. One of the senior development team claimed that the bosses knew the fundamental flaws. That one of the senior developers told Computer Weekly that the EPOS system was built with no design documents, no test documents, no peer reviews, no code reviews. I mean, pretty much what's what of no-nos, as it were. I mean, a full list of bugs in the system has never been put together, or at least has never been released to the general public. But I mean, there were things. It was things like one operator in Scotland, when their system froze, they would repeatedly hit a key, and she was trying to record a transfer of £8,000 in cash from her main branch to a sub branch, and the bug created this discrepancy. She did it 3 times, and she was basically held responsible for £24,000, which, as I say, was just a system error.
A system error. She's now held accountable for it, which is a phenomenal amount of money that you are now accountable for. And part of the contract you sign when you're a sub-postmaster is any discrepancies you are accountable for. And so this appears to be happening on a repeated basis across not everyone, but across a lot of the sub-postmasters. And they appear to be calling in to the support office. And every time they call the support office says, you're the only person this has happened to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's mind-meltingly just appalling. They were. It's interesting that there was one of the helpline operatives has given an interview where basically they were told that they had to tell people who phoned in that was the case. They weren't allowed to say there were system failures or bugs. They'd be hauled across the coals if they sort of showed any sympathy at all, really. And so they dreaded Wednesdays. Apparently Wednesday was the day when all the sort of sub postmasters would look to sort of reconcile their accounts, and they'd be finding these faults and en masse calling in. But yeah, they got the opposite to help.
So from what you're saying, reconciliation of the point of sale system happened once a week on a Wednesday, not daily, once a week on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And for these people are lovely people, but they're not necessarily bookkeepers, and reconciliation is not necessarily their forte. And doing something only once a week is hard, especially if you don't understand it. It's hard. So we've got them on a Wednesday doing this reconciliation. They, as you mentioned, they press a key and it bounces out and it just gets bigger and bigger. And they ring up support, and every mention I have seen of support was exactly the opposite. It wasn't supporting.
No, absolutely. And yeah, they were then held responsible, asked to make up for these shortfalls at best. And the post office, started prosecuting people almost straight away. They prosecuted 700 people between 1999 and 2015. So it was an average of one person a week. And if you look, the average for the previous decade was 5 a year, which is just, abysmal. And as I say, many of these people went to prison for false accounting and theft. Many were financially ruined, made bankrupt, or took out loans. A couple of people said they lived in their cars. These are meant to be people who were pillars of their small communities, who were made destitute. Some of their relationships broke down. One woman was jailed on her son's 10th birthday while she was pregnant. And in 4 cases, tragically, people took their own lives. So, it is a human tragedy at the center of it, really.
The human tragedy that impacted the individual and everyone around them and the village around them is truly terrible. What I think for our global listeners will be fascinating, and I've lived in the UK and I had no idea about this, was the post office has private prosecution laws, which is...
It does.
Bizarre that they were the ones who were actually able to... I don't exactly understand how it works, but it seems to be this situation like when you're in the army has its own prosecution laws, and the post office has its own private prosecution laws. And then you're saying we've gone from prosecuting 5 people a week to 5 people a year to 52 people a year. The volume of people you now need to do that prosecution, how do they not think that there's something is going wrong here?
Yeah, it was just an abysmal sort of institutional failure, really, that they just pressed on with the system regardless. Working with Fujitsu, who, while within that company, they knew that there were errors. How soon the post office knew that there was a massive issue with the system is unclear. I get the feeling the date shifts earlier and earlier, as it were. But yes, it wasn't great. I think another 300 cases were actually brought by the Crown Prosecution Service themselves. The principal agency that decides which cases to prosecute. Which again, it's if you're adding, a poor software system, the post office, and then the British legal system failing people as well, which is, tragic. I think you'd have seen in the drama that people would go into court just believing that they would be exonerated because of the British justice system. And, we're absolutely shocked when that wasn't the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've sort of reading online, there are some cases where no evidence was put forward other than a discrepancy. No fingerprints, no money found, no expensive cars in the driveway, no CCTV footage, but they're still prosecuted on no evidence. And I do think that generally we as lay people think if we have to go to court and we've not done anything, we will be treated fairly. It's kind of shocking what unfolded, and clearly very upsetting for the people involved. I don't understand how it seems that so many employees seem to be involved in the cover-up. So we've got lawyers who must be thinking, this is bizarre. We've got people in support who are like you said, that they'll get in trouble if they say anything. But if you're sitting in a support room and you can see everyone around you is getting slammed on a Wednesday, don't you say something?
It is, it's a damning indictment of the culture at the time at all the institutions involved, really. There is a public inquiry going on at the moment that has statutory powers to call anyone they like. We're going through phase 4 at the moment. So this is the teams involved in investigating and prosecuting the subpostmasters. And I was reading it that's just concluded, actually. And a quote from one of the lawyers representing the victims called it a parade of liars, bullies, amnesiacs, and arrogant individuals. And it's hard to disagree with that, really. Like watching it, you can watch it all on YouTube. It's an infuriating affair. You've got people who ordered documents to be shredded, people who celebrated when subpostmasters went to prison, people who conveniently forgot everything about their time at the post office, even when they'd signed detailed witness statements. It's an absolute rogues gallery.
And to what you're saying, we're recording this in February 2024, and there is actually live, I'm not sure if the word is testimonies, happening on YouTube during British time every day. And I can sort of see in the forums, go and look now, this is happening, this person's talking. Something that has been going on for 20 years. It's great that it is being surfaced, but it's truly shocking that it is being surfaced and it's sitting on YouTube, which is great. And what you talk about, the bullying and intimidation that these people went through is extraordinarily distressing. And anyone who enters into, I imagine, anyone, and you might not be able to comment on this, but anyone who enters into sort of this sub-postmaster relationship, I'm sure has had a background check done on them. Like, I'm sure there's some sort of formal background. When you enter into a partnership with people, you do a background check. So they've already done this background check, and yet they thought this, significant percentage are taking this money. They don't appear to be leading a good lifestyle. They're not going, having fancy holidays. In fact, they're sitting destitute in their cars. It's certainly very confronting.
Absolutely. And as I say, it was back in 2009. The aforementioned Mr. Bates sort of formed this Justice for Subpostmasters alliance that tried to fight back, really. And I think by then word had got round that it wasn't just them. There were more people involved. And, but I think a lot of people were afraid to go public because they were afraid of being prosecuted themselves. So, as I say, Alan Bates put together this group, got a bit of a ripple at the time. The post office conducted an internal investigation a year later. That was a complete whitewash. Didn't really wash with anyone. They appointed forensic accounting firm to examine the allegations, and that pushed things on a bit further. And it was only in 2017, I think they managed to wrangle about 500 sub-postmasters to take legal action against the post office. And they won in the High Court, where the judge absolutely ripped into the post office. I mean, it was and excoriating verdicts, just saying that Horizon was not remotely robust. But I mean, that's in 2019, and that's 5 years ago, and still, I mean, a few convictions have been overturned. But we've had inquiries, first of all, a non-statutory one, and then this current one that's still going on. There are various compensation schemes that are going on, but the speed of the payments is absolutely glacial, and the people have had to pay tax on them. The post office are paying them in one lump sum, which is pushing them into sort of higher rates of tax. And yeah, it's an infuriating affair. And, it's taken the post office TV drama to really sort of bring it to light.
The word glacial is so appropriate in terms of the movements in what is happening. Here's a brief message from sponsors supporting our show. Do you need an ERP? From the founder of Receipt Bank, Dext, Translucent turns your existing single-entity accounting system into a multi-entity accounting solution without needing to migrate to Intact, NetSuite, or other larger systems. Simply connect your existing accounting software and Translucent will consolidate all your data to create a single financial system of record. Translucent Apps provides workflows for your multi-entity needs, such as searching for transactions at group level, creating consolidated reporting, managing intercompany transactions, live connecting your data to spreadsheets, and more apps are being released every quarter. Visit translucent.io to get started. All you need to do is connect your existing accounting software, and once your data has synced, you're ready to go. Translucent Explorer is completely free, so you can try the product without commitment. Looking for additional revenue streams that are low touch but add value for your clients in 2024? Get rewarded when you refer businesses through to Employment Hero's cloud-based HR and payroll platform. You can unlock additional revenue with a 10% commission on successful referrals. Learn more by visiting employmenthero.com/become-a-partner. So to circle backwards a little bit here, the post office has appointed forensic accountants second sight in June 2012. And they're the forensic accountants, and they do seem to uncover bugs, and they do seem to present this. And then in 2015, their contract was cancelled by the post office when they're now they're not getting the documents they're requesting. There's tension, and then their contract is cancelled. But it does seem, in some respects, in some ways, that forensic accountant and that firm are, to an extent, hero in this story, in that they are actually surfacing some of the stuff that is supporting them. Now, I'm not sure whether that's from the TV drama, etc., but it did seem that was the case.
No, absolutely, and I think they tried their best, but I think a lot of the documentation was withheld. A lot of the testimony that was given to them was frankly not true. And so they did their best under the circumstances, as it were. I'm not sure we'll really ever get to the bottom of exactly what happened, even with statutory inquiries and whatnot. But I think it's fair to say they moved things along anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I always say to people, accountants don't save lives, they save livelihoods. But it does seem in this case, when they brought some accountants in, that they perhaps were, in fact, saving more than livelihoods, has come out and sort of they say, like, with the TV show coming out, even more stories have emerged because, as you said, people felt scared to say anything, and I think they said 50 more stories have come out, which is just terribly sad, because you imagine that they're sitting in their environment, in their house, and all of that tension and concern and worry is in their body, and they're not sharing it with anyone, and no one's, they don't know even who to contact, and like, it's also interesting that this kind of started in 1999, really before we had the internet. We did have the internet, but we didn't have communities there. And it's interesting that they did seem to sort of physically find each other through telephone books and through making phone calls and through meeting in buildings, rather than on a Reddit community group or on a WhatsApp group or something like that. And I would hope something like this, because we can connect quicker on the internet, things would happen quicker. If things happen these days, I don't know, but I did think that was potentially a compounding element to the puzzle. So as someone who sits in the accounting technology space, I agree that reconciling a point of sale system is tricky, and it does take a bit of gumption to do that. And this is sort of covering old water, but I just don't understand how they didn't have someone sit in there. You're saying it's for a week, because I just said for a day, but sit in there for a week, watch the whole thing, and then say, yeah, there's a problem. Like, I go into firms and do that. I've gone into firms and done that repeatedly, and many times it's processing issue. We have found problems with the system. We have contacted support and said there are problems with the system here that are causing financial errors. I just don't understand. And I just don't understand how that didn't happen. But it doesn't seem like even if it happened, they would have believed them.
I think it did. From testimony I've read, that engineers did come and sort of have a look at the box under the desk, as I've read it being called, and they'd take a look, they'd poke around, they'd say, oh yeah, we'll get back to you in a couple of days, and then it would just be completely silent. It would be head office would just block it, and it was very much a sort of command and control environment there.
Yeah. And during all of this time, the CEO, Paula Van Els, who's also a priest, gets awarded a CBE, which is, I imagine, for the people quite upsetting and disappointing.
Yeah, one of the few things that's happened after the TV drama aired was that she's actually handed it back now, which I mean, we couldn't get any of the bankers involved in the banking crisis to actually do that, so it's a very small win for the campaign, but nevertheless, it's something.
So I hope that gives them some solace. So I'd like to talk about the storytelling aspect of the scandal, because this scandal's been going on for 2 decades. And then we have this 4-part television drama, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, and it's broadcast on ITV in January 2024, so that's just last month. Written by, to give her credit, Gwyneth Hughes, directed by James Strong, and led by the character actor Toby Jones. So for people listening in, Toby was, I think, the one character I knew in the show. I didn't know the other people in the show, but for people listening in who may not recognize his name, he's been in lots of movies you'll know and love. Doctor Who, The Hunger Games, Captain America, Indiana Jones, and he was the voice of Dobby, the Malfoy's family house elf in the Harry Potter series. So I'm sure people will be aware of Toby Jones, and I didn't realize he'd been in so many different shows, but it is a very good show, and there is I imagine for you, Tom, watching it, it was difficulty, and you had all the emotions behind it, but there is a bit of lightness in the show, there is a bit of humor in the show, and there is a bit of success in the show. But for anyone who does who's listening in, who likes accounting technology, this is a must-watch TV show. It's viewed by the general public, and the scandal becomes a major news story and a major political issue. You'd been writing about it. You and Accounting Web had been writing about it for years. Why was the mainstream media not interested in this prior to the TV show?
I think, yeah, to be fair to some of the mainstream publications, they had written about it, but it would tend to be sort of buried on the business pages or in some of the sort of more niche publications. I think, to be honest, it is when you're in a particular world, whether that is computing or accounting technology, it can sometimes be easy to just write for your audience, write for your bubble, as it were. And I think what the drama did incredibly well was to bring out the human aspect of the story. I think, I could get terribly carried away in writing about the real specifics of what was going wrong with each individual bug, or the point of sale system, or where the money was going into all these suspense accounts and everything like that. But yeah, I think that's not really going to catch the imagination of the general public. But yeah, the sense of an injustice being done to hundreds, 900 innocent people, I think was what the drama got across so well, I thought.
Yeah, and it was people like, I remember one of the opening scenes is the lady's, as well as doing what she's doing, she's baking lots of muffins and taking them around the village and sort of handing them over to the bakery, because she does that as well. She does the muffin making, and she does or what do you call them, muffins? Do you call them cupcakes?
I think it's definitely muffins crept in. If you do one of those Google Trends search over the years, I'd imagine we'll see the muffin convergence fairly soon.
The muffin convergence. Maybe that was Seinfeld coming in, and they had that muffin top episode. Remember that? And then they only cooked muffin tops out of tins. Yeah, but she was, and I think from the aspect of storytelling. When accountants are communicating with their clients, look, I was watching that show going, what's happening with that suspense account the whole time? But you're right. The people needed to know what's happening with the lady who's walking around with the cupcakes, what's happening with her. Whereas, and telling the aspect of the story that's going to resonate with the people that you need it to resonate with, whether that be sort of, the general public or the accountants, because it seems like reading the comment sections on Accounting Web, the accountants were all over it, aware in terms of awareness of what was happening.
So absolutely, yeah, and I mean going back as far as 2012, we've got comments saying that they're organising petitions to help with their sub-postmaster in their local village who'd been fired and things like that. So yeah, they were all over it. I guess with these big stories that hit the headlines, you're never quite sure what's pushed them onto the headlines. It might have been just a quiet news week in the beginning of January, and the drama came out at the right time, or maybe it was such a compelling human story that it would have done that anyway. Who knows? But as I say, it's I'm sure everyone involved is immensely grateful that they took the time to write and produce it.
Oh, absolutely. So I think you have touched on it a bit, but I was wondering if you can share what has happened in the last month. What has happened since that TV show has aired?
Yes, so we've had as I say, the former Post Office chief executive handing back her CBE after her petition had got more than 1 million signatures for her to do that. The government is trying to pass legislation that is unprecedented, actually, to just quash all the convictions. There have been some misgivings about that based on the fact that the government senior lawyers were concerned that they might be clearing guilty people, but I think that just got swept away. So hopefully soon this legislation is going to pass. So
900 sort of people who were convicted. Was it 900 people who have convicted? May is that right? I think you mentioned 700 and then 300. So potentially 1,000 people who were convicted. potentially?
95 convictions have been overturned already. I mean, these are the people who fought incredibly hard to do so. But yeah, I mean, more people are coming forward. You mentioned there, I mean, after the TV drama, 50 more people came forward who've been quiet. But the public inquiry rumbles on. As I mentioned, we've heard from some of these the people involved in prosecuting these people. We've heard from the foot soldiers. We're going to hear from the generals next. So these are the people running the show at the time. MPs called in Fujitsu, so we had a grovelling apology from their European MD and a vague promise of helping to contribute to some of the compensation. But after the inquiry had wound down, the Metropolitan Police is looking into the handling of the whole thing. So, whether some of these expert witnesses from the post office and from Fujitsu actually committed perjury or perverted the course of justice, which, I mean, given the line of questioning at the public inquiry, I think is a very real prospect. That people, the likes of Fujitsu, could face criminal investigations themselves. But these things do take an awful long time to rumble through. So, yeah.
Gosh, it does seem like it is going on. It will go on for a very, very long time, what you're suggesting there. And terrible if the employees who, God, it's just terrible, terrible, terrible. I will pop links to all of the resources that I referred to and links to lots of the stories that from the accounting web in the show notes, and I'll find the YouTube channel as well if people listening in are interested in watching that. And I know that it is sort of being taught. If once you start following it, you see you suddenly go, oh, it's everywhere. But until I started following it, I was unaware. What other scandals are not being talked about in the non-mainstream media that really deserve our attention, Tom?
My goodness, yeah, we've we've had a number of people write to us about the next post office scandal off the back of that. I think, if I'm being completely honest, this is like something we've never seen before in our world. We've had audit scandals aplenty, and we've had government wasting tens of millions of pounds on various harebrained schemes. But this just, it goes beyond anything we could possibly have hoped for. I think probably the biggest equivalent that seems to be gaining traction at the moment is they call it the loan charge, where I think it's the sort of late 2000s, maybe 2010, something like that, where there was a sort of tax avoidance scheme where people were paid in loans as opposed to I think that there's a range of people involved in these schemes. Very unfortunately, some people were basically made to sign up to it in order to get jobs. So nurses and care workers and things like that were signed up by agencies through this, and suddenly have just had, when HMRC got a ruling at a tax tribunal, suddenly demands of life-changing amounts of money would land on their doormat from HMRC, and HMRC, our tax authority, has been extremely bullish about prosecuting that. So that's definitely the one that seems to have got the most traction, but it is slightly more nuanced in some cases than the Post Office Horizon scandal.
Goodness. And you wouldn't imagine that nurses are earning such a large amount of money that they want to be in some tax dodging scheme.
No, absolutely. And as I say, I think it was part of the agency model that a lot of sort of hospices or private hospitals use, or sort of care working facilities rather than sort of NHS facilities.
And does that mean they avoid, I don't know how employment pay works in the UK. But does that mean they avoid paying superannuation or pension and national insurance fees?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That was the wheeze. I mean, in some cases they had sort of 20% knocked off, and then the agency just wouldn't pay the tax, and we're sort of avoiding that way. But it seems like there were a lot of variations on a theme. So every case is subtly different. It's not quite as cut and dried as the post office one. So I'm not quite sure Toby Jones is going to be making a drama about the loan charge anytime soon.
Goodness. Thank you, Tom, so much for joining me on the Accounting Apps podcast and explaining the story to our listeners. I really appreciate it. It's a very difficult story to share, but I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to let our listeners know about?
Well, for those in the UK, we're holding an event, the Festival of Accounting and Bookkeeping in Birmingham on the 13th and 14th of March. So if you're around, do come along. We've got some special guests, including our very own Heather Smith. So we're delighted to welcome you there, Heather. Looking forward to catching up again.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very excited, and it looks like the who's who of the British accounting industry shall be there, and a lot of people I'll get to meet for the first time. So very excited by that.
Brilliant.
Thank
you for having me on.
I'll put a link to register in the show notes as well. How can our listeners get in contact with you, Tom?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Tom Herbert, and I'm on X, formerly Twitter, formerly X, as AWebTom. So yeah, do check me out there.
Fabulous. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope that everyone who has been impacted by this gets sort of the justice and the peace that they need. And really, you can never underestimate the power of storytelling. Thank you. Keep up to date with the modern accounting technology landscape by subscribing to the Accounting Apps podcast, the Accounting Apps newsletter, and join the conversations happening in the Accounting Apps Mastermind community. I'm your host, Heather Smith, and I'm pretty easy to find on all social media platforms. I look forward to connecting with you.